Good evening, everyone, and you're all very welcome to our March talk. It's a wet night here in Ballinderry in Kilbarron, Terryglass. And I was just thinking about the talk that we have tonight, the stained glass windows. You love when the sun shines on them and you can sort of see them at their best. So we look forward after this talk to maybe brighter days and sunnier weather, and that we can go and visit some of the places that Dr. Christy Cunniffe will talk to us tonight about. I want to thank again Niall for hosting the talk, and again for all his support. I welcome all of you and thank you again, because it's your support that keeps us going as well. Our next talk will actually be in the second Friday in April, and that's with Mr. Jimmy Duggan, and it's on the formation of the Irish landscape from the Ice Age to the present day. So we look forward to that. But at the moment it's March, and our March talk is with Dr. Christy Cunniffe, and we welcome you, Christy. This is the second time that you've supported us and agreed to do a talk. And your last one was absolutely brilliant, and we look forward to this. And we know that it will also be an excellent talk. And I'm going to not take up too much more time. I'm going to hand you over to Christy, whose talk is on stained glass windows in the hidden heartlands. And so from the hidden heartlands, Christy, over to you. And we'll talk to you again in an hour. Okay.
No, I just want to check something here first. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to make sure that I seem to have two different versions up. I just want to make sure I have the right one up. That's all, because I should have my hide presenter view. Well, that's what I actually want. I want to find my presenter view. Maybe I hide it and show it again. Just bear with me now. Anyway, let's see what happens here. Yeah. That's perfect now. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be able to delighted to be invited back by the Kilbarron Terryglass Historical Society to give another talk. This is something that I suppose I have developed an interest in over the years. This whole theme of stained glass and the artwork related to stained glass and that. And just to preface it all before I start, I'm not necessarily going to give an art historical talk. I suppose really what I aim to do here is I aim to create an awareness of the quality of stained glass that we have in our churches and the significance and importance of that glass. We can take it for granted. That's one of the things. And a number of years ago, a few of us, Helen and a few of us in different societies came together to consider what it was that we actually have in our region, in the Heartlands, different topics, if you like, or different aspects of our heritage, our cultural heritage, of our archaeology, of our art, etc., that we have that makes our place different and makes our place interesting to ourselves and to others. And one of the things that we discussed at that stage was the quality of the stained glass that you will actually find in what is now termed the hidden heartlands. But I suppose I'm going to be focusing very much on stuff that's quite close to us. I'm going to take a tour down the Tipperary side, the Munster side of the lake. I'm going to come back up the Clare side of the lake. I'm going to come back into Galway. I'm going to move across to Loughrea, and I'm going to move across into County Offaly, and I'll go as far as Boher and places like that where you have exceptional glass. That's if staying within time. I mightn't quite get there, but that's my intention. Now, the very first thing I want to do is I just want you to take a look at that slide in front of you there. My title there is a cornucopia of colour, stained glass windows in the Heartlands region. But just take a look at that image that you see in front of you.
Sorry,
and
Chris,
just think about
you're not sharing. I don't hear. Are you sharing your slide?
Oh, I didn't realize that wasn't shown. Oh, sorry. Can you see those? No.
1 second now.
No.
Can you see them?
Not up, Christy, no.
Oh, I hadn't realised that at all.
I just pause you.
I said a few words there without my slides actually moving forward. I hadn't set myself up properly, so I apologize for that. But basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a tour through our part of the hidden heartlands around Lough Derg. I'm going to travel down the Munster side. I'm going to come back up the Munster side and the other side in County Clare, back into Connacht, into Galway, and I'm going to skip across the Shannon over to Boher and places like that in County Offaly. And of course, I'm going to go over as far as Loughrea in East Galway as well. All these areas are now in the hidden heartlands, this new marketing area for tourism. And of course, all of this, what I'm doing here, grew out of meetings that Helen and different groups, different societies and different groups attended 2 years ago in Portumna. We had a number of meetings looking at what it was that we have that makes our area special. And one of the things that I was looking at was the stained glass that we have in the churches of our region. And this is not really going to be an art historical talk. This is more about looking at the practicalities, looking at what we have, looking at the artists that are in these churches, you know, and just getting an appreciation for the sheer volume of stuff that we have, but also the quality of material that we have. And I'll where we can identify them, I'll tell you who the artists are. I might be able to give you a small bit of background information on them. But even to start off, my opening slide there, my cover slide there, just take a look at that. What do you see? What's your first thought when you look at that particular slide? I know that you're not going to be answering me, but
people might want to unmute themselves. I might want to put something in the chat there, Christy, maybe on that.
If somebody does want to tell me what you see in front of you, do so. And if you don't, that's fine. Now, I'm going to tell you what you're looking at. Just, you know, when you examine stained glass, sometimes it's the minutiae that you have to look at. There can be so much in a window. There can be so much detail. This, first of all, is a Clark studio. It's a Harry Clark studio window. So, you know, anything that's associated either with Harry Clark himself or the studio, they're usually very elaborate and highly ornate, sometimes quite stylized and that. But you're actually looking at a pair of slippers or shoes, believe it or not. The first thing you think there is you're looking at an ant's head or a butterfly or something else, but it's actually a pair of shoes, a pair of slippers. And this is the sort of ornament, the detail that you get when you go right up close to some of the work in these windows. And I suppose this is what I want to highlight. The other thing that I want to highlight as well is that, you know, when I was photographing these churches, in a lot of cases, there was no information whatsoever to be had within the church. And that's a pity because, you know, a visitor to the church, I know the primary function of a church is for worship, but the wonderful thing about churches is that we have some wonderful art in those churches as well. And most Catholic churches, except in rural areas now or areas where they might have suffered vandalism or that, most Catholic churches are still open to the public. So people can go in there and when they're in, they can actually engage with the likes of the windows and the Stations of the Cross and the other pieces of art that are in those places. So I'm really, I suppose, making an appeal to people involved with heritage and to heritage groups and that in particular, to maybe do that bit of research into churches, find out who the artists are, and do up a little, some sort of a little brochure, or maybe it's just something that can be hung on a wall or that. So there's somebody like myself when we come in, that we say, oh yeah, that window was by Alan Tomlin, or that window was by the Harry Clark Studios, or that particular piece of work over there was by the Airlie Studio, or maybe by William Airlie himself, or, you know, that type of stuff. So that we get a bit of information about it. But anyway, I'll move on. And now, this particular window that you're looking at here, I'm being, I suppose, very patriotic, and or maybe very parochial, which should be more so. The window you're looking at the moment is a window in the Catholic Church in Aircourt. I live in Clonfert. Aircourt, Clonfert, and Meelick are the three parishes, if you like, that make the bigger parish of Aircourt. And when I made my confirmation back in 1968, I think it was 68. It was only a Gossoon at the time. But I remember looking up at this window, and I was absolutely amazed by the brilliance of the window itself. my photograph doesn't do it justice here whatsoever. And I think I have another photograph of it later on that might be better. I might have more light in it. But this particular window is by William Airlie. William Airlie was, it was part of that great Airlie family. They had the Airlie studios. Different members of the Airlie family worked for different studios, and some of them, like William, worked independently. But this is a wonderful window. It was erected in Air Court for the Eucharistic Congress in 1932. So you can see even straight away the fact that it went up at that stage. But it's an amazing window. Now I'll deal with it in detail after. But just this window, if you like, had influence on me. It actually, in many ways, as a young fellow looking up at it, there was a few things, and I mentioned this earlier, and I was warned not to go too far with it, but I'm not. There was a few things here. The window itself was amazing. We had a big bishop at that stage, a man who a lot of you will know, and maybe some of you might be related to him. Tom Ryan was the bishop of Clonfert back in the 60s. You might remember Tom Ryan for the debacle over the Late Late Show and the bishop and the nighty. Well, that's, that was the era we're talking about. And of course, young lads at that time were warned that the bishop was going to give them a slap in the jaw and all of those things. That was playing on my mind, wondering what's going to happen when you have to go up here now to the altar. And then the other thing that occurred on the day of my confirmation was we went next door to Nicholas Lahart's, bought a lovely football, went home and kicked it into the bushes and burst it. So there's certain things, but the thing that really stands out is this window. An absolutely amazing window in a small little rural village in East Galway. And you'd say, what's a window like this doing in a small church in a small village? Well, that's part of what we'll hopefully explore as we go along. And then we move across to Terryglass. Now, the windows in Terryglass are of a different scale, if you like. These two windows are by mayors of Munich. You often see that they're advertised as mayors of Munich and London. They worked out of both places. And when you look at windows like these, they're wonderful windows in themselves. You have St. Patrick on the left there, and you have St. Bridget on the right. And even if I didn't know who they were, this is the other thing with religious art. You have the iconography, you have the features, and you have the attributes, and you have different things that are associated with the saints that allow you to read the story, if you like. Even if we didn't see the name Patrick underneath, well, we know that this man he's doing something with a serpent. He's trampling on a serpent. He's dressed in green, which is the more traditional colors that we now associate with St. Patrick. He has his fingers raised, giving the episcopal blessing, which tells us that he's actually a bishop or he's a patriarch. And also he has his crozier in the other hand, in his left hand. And of course, we go right across to Bridget. Bridget actually has a light there with a flame issuing from it. And this links back to Bridget's own prowess, both as a Christian saint and also as a pagan goddess. And of course, she has the staff as well. She really is the only Irish female saint that was regarded as, a patriarch, if you like, a female patriarch at the time. But the thing about this window is it's by mayors of Munich. And people who were looking at the art at the time, for example, Edward Martin of Tullira Castle near Gort in South Galway. Edward Martin wanted to commission windows for his own church at home in Laban, where he wanted to install windows to commemorate his mother and members of his family. And he found that the windows that were being brought in from Europe and from England and places like that, and even from Ireland, some of the windows that were being produced here in Ireland, were what he regarded, and others regarded as factory-made windows. They were, if you like, rolled off. There were windows that could be picked out of a catalogue, and often you'd find that the same window could be supplied to different places, maybe a different saint's name at the bottom, maybe a slightly different coloration, but in a way, it was almost like ordering from a catalogue. So they wanted to overcome this. They reckoned that the glass, the manufacture of glass had actually gone back. It had become debased, that it was now, rather than being an artist or an artisan's profession, that was now a factory operated business. And of course, in Ireland, Edward Martin was deeply involved with the whole Gaelic revival and the literary revival. He was an influential character, and he was involved in the setting up of a stained glass studio called on Terryglass. And that was really that. And at the same time, you had people like Harry Clark emerging as well. His father, Joshua Clark, was running a stained glass studio in Dublin. Harry went on to study medieval art, medieval stained glass, to look at artists abroad and that. And between him and Sarah Purser on the other side with Terryglass, both of those artists and others started to revive. They started what we call the Celtic revival, or the revival of what was regarded as Celtic art, a new offering of Celtic art in Ireland. And they brought on the whole art, if you like, of stained glass. They went back to the old methods. They went back to the methods of painting glass, of firing glass, of painting it again and firing it. Clark and Michael Healy, who was involved with Terryglass, they actually experimented with glass and they started to pickle it with acids and things like that. So we end up with these amazing coloured windows, multi-layered colours within the glass itself. Some of them pickled so that the light filters through. It's almost like, they're like really fine lace or that. It's almost like looking at a mist. So you get this light all shimmering through the glass and that. And this was the difference. This glass really had an effect on churches and the places that it was installed. And of course, the great thing about it was that there was a lot of church building going on at the time. And in the case of the Diocese of Clonferty, or west of the Shannon, we were fortunate that the bishop of the time, or actually two bishops, because there was a change of bishops midstream, were building the cathedral in what would be regarded as the Catholic cathedral for Clonfert Diocese. They were building that in Loughrea. Edward Martin was instrumental. He was friendly with the bishop, but he was also related to local families around Loughrea, and between himself and those families, they managed to patronise windows for Loughrea. And once the patronage started, now the artists set up a studio, started up training and all of that, and they actually had people to patronise these churches. So I suppose that's an important thing as well, the patronisation. And when we look at the windows, look at these two windows here in Terryglass, what you will find when you look at them, you will actually find the donor's name, or the people that actually sponsored or had the windows made for members of their family. And without that, we wouldn't have the glass that we actually have. So, but sadly, those windows are the windows that the likes of Edward Martin, Sarah Purser, Harry Clark, and people like these are the windows that they were trying to, if you like, banish in ways. They had hoped to bring on a different quality of art and a different quality of window, and they did. For example, in Lurra, we have two different artists in Lurra that we can look at, or two different quality windows that we can see in Lurra. First of all, we have The Angel and Woman at the Tomb by Michael Healy, 1918. Michael Healy was a member of Terryglass, the Tower of Glass. Terryglass sort of stood the test of time. It was something. It was a statement even. That they were actually regard themselves as the Tower of Glass. They were the powerhouse, or the tower of glassmaking in Ireland. But this is a wonderful window here. The Angel and the Women at the Tomb. And Michael Healy was really and truly one of the finest artists. And if you really want to look at Michael Healy's work, where you go to see it, almost from start to finish, is to Loughrea Cathedral, not far really from where you're sitting now at the moment. So it's worth a drive some Sunday or come into the summer, head over that way some evening, and just see the quality of glass. But what you can actually see there is you can see Healy's work progressing. You can see us moving forward. You can see where he starts out using, I suppose, the more naive type of art, something similar to what was being imported from Europe and imported from England and even from the Irish studios, developing up to this really fine art, and then to this wonderful art altogether, where he expresses his portraits and that using acids and stuff like that, where he really changes the whole art scene in Ireland. So this one in St. Ruan's Church of Ireland Church in Lurra is very, very important within the Heartlands. And next is this one here, is The Ascension by Alfred Ernest Child, A.E. Child. And again, this is from Terryglass, dated 1906. This is a really fine example. And of course, you have the Sacred Heart there in the middle. And in many ways, the way the Sacred Heart is portrayed there is, you could almost see that being borrowed by the likes of the Harry Clark Studios later, that sort of representation of Christ in the middle. But wonderful window here. So 2 high quality stained glass windows from the on Terryglass Studios, or from the Celtic Revival period in St. Ruan's Church in Lough. So just starting out from that, these are magnificent windows, and they have to be seen with the light coming in through them. You know, a stained glass window needs to be viewed with the light. And of course, it's telling a religious story. They're also telling the story of the patrons who patronized these, and they're also telling us a lot about the artists themselves and their progress. So we can read the progress of artists with these. The next set of windows that I have here are also in Lough, but these are actually in the Catholic Church, in St. Ruan's Catholic Church in Lough. And the first one on the left is St. Patrick. The next one then is St. Ruan himself. These are very much in traditional style. You know, the portraits of the saints themselves here are very much in the same vogue, if you like, as what we got from Myers of Munich. The difference, though, is that if you look very closely at these, you will actually see there's a lot of Celtic interlace around the edges. The ornaments around them, you have the Gothic canopy, but if you look outside of the canopy and down along the frame and around the bottom, and even to see the way that the lettering is done in Irish. So we have these what we call zoomorphic interlace, in other words, animal interlace, the sort of stuff that we'd expect to find in the 12th century from the Romanesque, used here in the neo-Gothic window. But this is, if you like, the first step really into the Celtic Revival movement in Ireland. So, you know, the Watsons of Youghal were really delving into the Celtic Revival, though they hadn't changed the portraiture that the same way as the other artists had. But nevertheless, it's Celtic Revival. You can actually see the Celtic motifs being used here. And you have to put this into context as well, because the latter 19th century, you had the arts and crafts movement. You have the whole Celtic Revival movement. You have the Gaelic Revival movement. You have the foundation of the GAA. You have all of these different engagements, if you like, within the country, looking back to Celtic Ireland, even within the scholarship. Our understanding of archaeology and art and all of that was all based on, if you like, the looking back. And these windows are expressing that in that sense. Now, I mightn't be following in strict order, but here's another magnificent window. You saw the very first slide I showed you there. We'll get to that after a while. It's way outside this area. But what we're actually looking at here is we're looking at a window, the one on the left there, the full window itself. You can see the crucifixion of Christ there, a wonderful crucifixion. But what's very obvious in that is the symmetrical, if you like, if you look at the feet in the second upper slide there, the 2 feet are absolutely symmetrical. They're almost like a mirror image. You could nearly crease that down the middle and fold it over. And you know, it was as if the 2 feet are one copied off the other in reverse, if you like, a mirror image. And this is something you find in the Harry Clark, but especially here in the Harry Clark studio work. And this window here is by a man called William Dowling. It dates to 1934, around 1934. And William Dowling was a member of the Harry Clark Studios. And this is what we find with Harry Clark. We had several really high quality artists working for the studios. The studios, excuse me, I have a cold, so I might cough a bit. The studios were in place prior to the death of Harry Clark himself. Harry's father, Joshua Clark, set up the actual Clark Studios himself, or set up the Joshua Clark stained glass. But then, in his time, the Harry Clark Studios was set up. Harry Clark worked for the studios, but also worked on his own. Harry Clark died in 1931. So anything post 1931, you have to question it. So if you see a window with a date of 1934, 35, well, that's clearly not Harry Clark. You might actually find that a window that was dated 1932, there may be instances where Harry Clark might actually have worked on that, or he might have actually advised on it, or he might have overseen part of it before he died, because windows don't get done overnight. And even some of the stuff that was made prior to 31 isn't strictly Harry Clark. He would have had a hand in it in some form or shape. But anyway, this stuff is Harry Clark's studio, 1934, and the artist in that case is William Downing. And one of the problems that we had in a lot of instances is that we didn't know who the actual artist was. A lot of times we can ascribe stuff to Harry Clark Studios. But now, with the publication of the Gazetteer of Irish Stained Glass by David Carron, the republication of this, it was put out a number of years ago when David was a younger scholar, and he with Nicola Gordon-Bow and Michael Wynne, he was one of the editors. But now Davis himself has actually republished the Gazetteer of Irish Stained Glass, and it's a volume that anybody that's interested in stained glass should have under their arm. It's not going to give you every window. It can't. We have so many quality stained glass windows. It's not going to give you the Harry Clark Studio stuff. It might give you references to certain stuff. And then, of course, you can go into the Trinity collection and you can see some of the Harry Clark Studio stuff. And also Nival website will also give you information on some of the Harry Clark stuff. So with more modern research, we're actually beginning to find who the actual artists were themselves, as opposed to just simply put it down to the studios. But this is a very important one. If we look at look at the various images I have here. I see, can I actually use them? Yeah. Say, for example, this is what I'm talking about here with the symmetrical layout. Oh, sorry, no, that's of the feet. That's really stock and trade of the studio. And then you have the figure of Christ with the arms almost vertical. In some instances, in some windows, depending on the layout of the window, the arms can be almost fully vertical. So if you like to fill the space of the windows, if it's a single light window, the arms will be vertical. If it's like this, a triple light window, well, then they have more room to express themselves. And of course, in that as well, we have two other saints flanking the figure of Christ. Well, this is typical. You would have St. John on one side, that's John the Evangelist, and you have Our Lady, the Mother of Christ, on the other side. And sometimes you have other figures in there as well. And what else can we say about it? Yes, also in Puckane Church, we have another window. This one. Now, that's by Harry Clark Studios as well. But I don't know. What I'm saying is by Harry Clark Studios. It may not. It may actually be by an artist who worked with the Harry Clark Studios, who was now working for himself at a later stage. I'm not sure exactly when that window went in. But there's a few things there in that. We can see that the Last Supper. I am the bread of life, it states across the banner on the main window itself. And really what we're looking at here is we're looking at the Last Supper, we're looking at imagery associated with the crucifixion of Christ. We can see the sheaf of corn in the left underneath. We can also see the chalice in front of Christ and Christ blessing the bread there. In a way, it's sort of prefiguring the fact that Christ is going to be crucified, but also it's a link to the Eucharist. It's a Eucharistic symbolism. And over on the right then, on the other window, we actually have Joseph and Mary and the Christ child. I think if I'm correct, this is Christ being presented at the temple. So, there's rich religious iconography in all of this. But I would like to know who the artist is there myself. I'm saying that it is some member of the Harry Clark Studio or somebody that worked for the Harry Clark Studio. But, I don't have the actual name of the artist. And this is where it's important. It'd be wonderful if I'm a visitor to that church, that I should be able to look at a plaque on the wall or whatever it might be, a little booklet or something very simple that would actually detail and give me the information to the artist, when it was made, maybe who patronized it, who commissioned it, and also maybe a little bit of information about the iconography. What does some of the symbols mean? Because these are the sort of things that make art interesting, is understanding the story, if you like. We say on top there you have obviously you have God the Father. Underneath at the top of that window where you have the cloaked, the crowned Christ, that's obviously God the Father. You have the dove underneath, representing the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit, as would be said now. and in the other image, then we have Christ himself. So, it's telling the story of the Trinity there in many ways. Now, Cloughjordan is an important church from the perspective of Celtic Revival art. First of all, we have the Ascension, that big window with the 5 lights in it. And that's an interesting window because that window in itself is copying the actual opening of the window, if you like, without glass, is copying the sort of windows that you would expect to get in the 13th century. This early Gothic, tall lancet windows with irregular numbers. You could have 5, 7, 3. It's about proportions, about presenting the whole thing in this manner. It's about balance. But in here we have Christ in the middle, and we can actually see that Christ is shown here with so it's post-resurrection, so it's probably Christ. It's the Ascension with the 5 Irish saints, Saints Michael and James, as well are in there. So we have 2 of the, if you like, the universal saints, and the others are Irish saints are in there. But this is by Harry Clarke himself. Now, this is interesting because it is Harry Clarke, and it's named as Harry Clarke. So this is a very important window. So this is an actual Harry Clarke window, and this is what people get really excited about. Everybody gets excited about Harry Clarke. Sadly, they dismiss the studio a little. I wouldn't dismiss it. I think the studio is wonderful, but because there are wonderful artists in it. But Harry Clarke was so broad in his art. Some of the stuff was almost standard sort of religious, but some of the stuff that he really undertook was amazing sort of art, and it's much deeper, and some of it is very stylized, some of it is actually quite evocative, and some of it was even erotic. And this is one of the problems that Harry Clarke had, the likes of the Geneva window and this and things like that the Irish government wouldn't accept, simply because it didn't fit into what was seen as an acceptable norm at the time. And this is art, and this is how it can be portrayed in that. Now, that is a wonderful window to visit, and the thing that you really see there with that window are the mix of blues, all of the wonderful blues. We have the crimsons, we have the reds there to pick out Christ, but the blues on the saints, and you get the blues on the angels and the different characters there. And they're just so rich in color. But you have to see this in reality. Slides don't do justice to these sort of windows. Then, also in Cloughjordan, we have another series of windows. We actually have the Sacred Heart there. You can see the Christ pointing to his heart, the image of the Sacred Heart. That's by Harry Clarke Studios. And beside that, then there's a window, or associated with that, there's a window with the Child of Prague, also by Harry Clarke Studios. Now, this is where it would be nice to know which artist from the Harry Clarke Studios actually made this. We don't actually know in this instance. And then there are 2 windows on the side chapel, on the side wall of the church, side of the chancel, and you can see they're totally different types of windows. The glasses, the color is different, the imagery is different. You have it all of this rich colors. You have a far simpler, far more naive form of art, almost cartoon-like representations of the figures. And what we're actually looking at here is work by Evie Hone, and this was done in 1952. Evie Hone was one of the great artists. She was completely different to anything that Clarke did. She influenced a lot of artists in Ireland, but she was an especially important artist. And Evie Hone did a lot of work in County Galway. She did work in Connemara. She did Stations of the Cross. And you might remember a few years ago that the Stations of the Cross were, some of the Stations of the Cross were stolen from Kiltunna Church over near Athenry in East Galway. Well, that was Evie Hone work. Obviously, whoever stole them at the time couldn't sell them because they just couldn't be sold. There was no way of moving them on. And thankfully, they were got. Somebody told somebody where they were because the people wanted to offload them. They just couldn't deal with them. But they're back. The church, you just couldn't take a chance on putting back up the Evie Hone stuff there. And Evie Hone's work is absolutely magnificent. And when you look at it, there's certain aspects of the work of Evie Hone that you look at, the facial expressions and that, and you could be looking at a 13th or 14th century oak Madonna, or carving. It looks quite medieval in the way that it's presented and carved in that, or painted in that. So this is Evie Hone. As I say, she has several works in County Galway. She has two windows in the Cathedral in Loughrea. She has one in I won't remember the name of the place now. It's gone from me, but anyway, it might come back to me. Down near the Slieve Octies, and she has the Station of the Cross in Clontulla, and a lovely window of St. Brendan, and the St. Brendan with a mother and child, but the child is actually the O'Malley child. And there's a legend that tells us that, well, there's two different legends that tells us that the O'Malleys had a son, or sorry, had a daughter. This probably O'Malley's had a daughter, and they wanted an heir. They wanted a male heir. So Brendan, miraculously or magically or whatever you want to say, changed the gender of the child. But the other telling really is that the child was sick, and that Brendan, performed a miracle and saved the child, so that they could continue the line of that family of O'Malley's. But the interesting thing there is that it is St. Brendan, and I've seen the actual original cartoon for it. And it's interesting when you look at the cartoons that were generated by the artists to present to the priests, that send these on, if you like, to the local parish priests for his views and opinions. See, did he like what they're, this is what it could look like. And when you actually look at the cartoon and then look at the original or the actual produced piece, you find that certain elements were changed around. What was on the right in one might be on the left in the other. So sometimes the cartoons and the actual finished product may not be the same. But it is an interesting study in itself, just to see what does come out of the thing in the end. Now, this is a very modern window from the Harry Clark studio. It's dated to 1971, a short while before the studios closed. I can't remember the actual date that it closed, but it lasted up quite late. But this is a little window in the St. Mary's Church of Ireland Church in Nina. And there's Christ Blessing the Children by Harry Clark Studio. It's a lovely piece. And this was erected by the rector at the time. They had actually lost their 2-year-old child, and it was erected in memory of that child. So it's, you can see that there's a lot more to this. There's the imagery itself is based around Christ, blessing the children. Obviously, what any parent would want, that the child is safe, in Christ. But it's important as well because this rector was also worked on the missions and that, and you can actually see that she has children from different nationalities in this piece. So it's a very modern piece in that sense, but a wonderful piece of art, but a piece of Harry Clark studio work in St. Mary's Church of Ireland in Nina. So it's quite close to us, and it's within the Heartlands. Of course, that church would be locked. Normally, Church of Ireland churches are generally locked up, but you can always get the key when you go looking in these places. So that's the secret, I suppose, to know who has the key for the churches so that you can actually get in. And I suppose not to be outdone, the Church of the Immaculate Conception in Nina, the Catholic Church, it has some spectacular windows too. A lot of stuff by mayors of Munich. The east window here that you see, that big window with the 5 lights, that's a majestic window. Now, I wouldn't criticize that window. I wouldn't say because it's Myers is not as good a window. It's just a different type of window. It's it's what people refer to as the factory-made window. But there's wonderful iconography in that, wonderful imagery. When you follow this, you'll actually see there's quite a few scenes from the life of Christ in this. So it's telling you the full life of Christ. The nativity is in there. All the different elements that are associated, the crucifixion itself. You'll find that the resurrection is in there. There's so much in this. It's a veritable Bible in itself in how it tells stories. And this is what we're about. We look at windows and we see them as colorful pieces, and they're adding great light to a church, and they add this sort of mystery and, color to the place. But essentially what they're doing is they're telling us a parable or a story, either from the Bible or from some other church teaching. So they're an aid, I suppose, in some ways to worship, or maybe a distraction. worship either, if you look at it in a different light, but they were meant to relate a story, to help you understand certain stories, and to, the same as the crosses of the scriptures that you find in places like Clonmacnoise and Kells, other places like that, where you get the scriptural crosses. The same thing has been done. They're telling a story to people themselves. But also in that church, in what's now the shop in the church, or was the baptistry in the church, you have this window here. Again, the team of children, almost similar to what we saw back in the St. Mary's Church of Ireland church. You have the team of children here, and it's simply Suffer Little Children by Richard King of the Harry Clark Studios. And this is dated 1937. Now, Richard King went on to be an artist outside of the studio, after the studio. Richard King was a very important, and several of the King family were artists and stained glass artists, and worked in ceramics, and made crucifix and different things. But Richard King's work is absolutely spectacular, and an awful lot of the work you find with the crucifixions and that, a lot of the Clark Studio stuff can actually be given to Richard King, if you like. He can be credited with that. So totally. And also in here in the church are windows by early studios. So you have quite a mix of studios and artists at work in this church. And of course, going back again to the main thing, this took patrons. So when these churches were being built, sometimes the priests themselves patronized. The priest might pay for a window, and you get the parish to pay for a window, and then the business people and maybe the big farmers around the place would purchase a window. Maybe the local school teacher might be forced into buying a window in some of the churches, simply because he was being paid through the church and that. And the places ended up being fitted out by glass and that. Here we have nearer to home for yourselves. You have the Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Port Royal, Castletownara. 1950s windows here, and these are by the Clark Studios. You have the Assumption of Our Lady on the left, a wonderful window there. You can see Our Lady. You can see what would have been a sort of an almond shape, what they call a visa or a visa or a mandorla around her there, but it's done more in the sort of radiant light around the Virgin there. You see her standing on the serpent. She's crushing a serpent under her foot, and she's standing on the crescent moon. And that's the usual form of iconography that you find associated with the Assumption of Our Lady. She's been lifted up to heaven, but all of these other elements are shown with her. And at the bottom then, of course, you have an angel, and you have the dove in there. You have the various elements that you'd expect to find. The dove, of course, being a symbol of purity. And then on the other side, you have the Sacred Heart. You have Christ showing off his heart. He's exposing his heart. He's also exposing the wounds as well. You can see 4 of the 5 wounds there. The heart isn't pierced as such. Normally there's 5 wounds, the 5 wounds of Christ, 5 wounds of the crucifixion. But in this instance, we see the hands and the feet. But again, when we look at the feet here and look at the hands, everything is symmetrical. There's pure symmetry in how this is done. Okay, there might be other, and even the figure underneath, Christ with his arms extended. It's symmetrical. You could fold this in the middle. It's like a centerfold from a book, the way it's done. So wonderful work here by the Clark Studios. Again, this is something I would love to know exactly who the artist was that did this work. Was it Richard King, or was it one of the other artists? I don't know. St. Anna's Church, Killarney. We're gone around, we're gone across the Shannon now at this stage, and you can actually see that we have equally wonderful windows here in Killarney. First of all, excuse me, we have the Death of St. Francis. Now, that's actually by Joshua Clark. That's not, I don't actually have a date for that, but we have a date for the others of 1927. So perhaps, it was somewhere early in the century. But this is Joshua Clark. Joshua was the father of Harry Clark. But you can see that it's not too unlike the sort of work that Harry does later. But yes, it's very much linked to the earlier form. But a wonderful window there. I think that's not sure. No, but anyway, it's Joshua Clark, and you can see St. Francis in the bottom in that little quattrophile at the bottom there, and he been tended. But you can see him seated there in his robe as an old man, dying, obviously. And then the one on the right is the presentation of our Lord with the Annunciation and flight into Egypt. So you see the presentation of our Lord. You see Mary offering Christ up. Joseph is in the scene here. You can see Joseph with the doves, the pair of doves that he has to offer to the Jews in the temple, the two sacrificial doves that are here. And when you look at something like that, there's two things at play. First of all, you have the sacrificial doves, but the doves then take on the meaning of their own. They're actually, if you like, reminding us of it's almost foretelling what's going to happen to Christ. The same with the Agnus Dei. When you get the lamb shown, well, Ecce Agnus Dei, the words of John the Baptist, really that's foretelling what's going to happen. Christ, like the lamb, is going to be sacrificed. You have the sacrificial lamb. The same with the doves. In those ceremonies, blood was always left. It was always a sacrifice. So you bring the two doves to the altar to be sacrificed. And then up on top, of course, you see the priests, the high priests, and the different characters that you'd expect to find in that church. And at the bottom, then we have that wonderful flight into Egypt. And that's it's a totally different thing. So you're looking at a scene where Christ is running from Herod, that he gets the word, or Joseph gets the word, and he's told, and the angel comes and he tells him to arise more or less and to take Mary and the child and to go into Egypt to get away from Herod. And then, of course, we know what happens. Then there's different versions. We said you have the slaughter of the innocents and different things that follow from that theme. And also, we have other characters. These are these? Yeah, let's just go back there now. Yeah, these are. We got myself right now. Yeah, these are actually in Scariff. Yeah, and I can't even read my own notes. It's shocking. But this is the Sacred Heart Church in Scariff, and it has a series of wonderful windows. First of all, we said Saint Dionysius of Physiola and Saint Cayman. These were executed by Richard King in 1930-31. So, Saint Cayman is an important character there in that sense that he's a native saint on the Shannon. And they were made at the Harry Clark Studios. They're made by Richard King. He was working over the studios. And the quote that's given there is, "A voice proclaimed, 'Receive the stranger who approaches, Dionysius of Scotia, take him for your shepherd.'" So this is, obviously, Dionysius of Scotia was an important character, and the priest or the bishop saw fit to include him here in Scariff. Saint Coleman MacDua then and Saint Flannan is another one of the windows that you have there, and then you have Saint Bridget and St. Clair. All of these are all dates 1930, 31, 31, 32, that particular date. But again, all of the windows here, as far as we know, were executed by Richard King. And you're seeing the very same thing here. But you're also finding that there are native saints being used here. This is what's interesting, that they're actually expanding out and that they're bringing in the native saints along with some of the biblical themes. So there's two different things happening. We're commemorating our own saints, our own native saints along the Shannon and along that region. So that's very, very important. But at the same time, harking back to some of the biblical themes, such as the presentation and things like that you see on top. And it's always important to look at the other smaller windows, or to look at the panels at the bottom and the panels at the top. They tell other stories in all of this. So there's a lot going on here. You can just imagine for somebody to write up the story, the history, the donors' names, etc., of these windows, when they were installed, facts about them. You could actually do a full booklet on these windows here in Scariff. And that needs to be done. It's not enough to look at a website, to come along and look at a parish website and find that really all that's on is the practical functioning of the parish, but that maybe a picture goes up, but nothing else. There's a, if you like, there's a clientele like myself that would love to know more about these windows. Who commissioned them? Why did they commission them? What was the thought process? Right? Why did they pick that particular saint? There's always a story to this sort of thing. And the other thing, of course, too, that is worth touching on now, because you're a local group. Something that's not thought about enough is what happens in the future when the church gets to the stage that we don't have the numbers, and hopefully it won't. But looking at what is happening, what's going to happen to some of this absolutely magnificent art that's going to be sitting in churches? How do we preserve it? How do we protect it? What do we do with it? And also, how do we manage this today? Do people clean these windows? Do they go in with, well, whatever it is they might use? One time they might be using Vim or something like that. But, even the whole care and maintenance and management of windows and other artifacts is a very important thing. We undertook an audit of the churches of County Galway, and the amount of damage that we saw on windows alone was staggering. Some of them were let go simply because they didn't have wind. They didn't have wind protection. They didn't have these outer panels to protect them from the storm protection of that. So the buckles, the lead buckles, and the glass cracked, and all of that sort of stuff. But others were scratched away from overzealous window cleaning, if you like. There's a whole management thing to go with these as well, and these are works of art, highly significant pieces. So we have to think about them for the future. And I think it's from the community and from societies like yourselves that this has to come, because parishes have to take care of them themselves in the long term. Now, there are also windows that sort of moved in their history, that were elsewhere. And this is St. Gladys Church in Kilbarron. And this is this is an important window. This window was actually by Alfred Ernest Child, A. Child. We already met some of his work earlier back in Lura. But this is the Risen Christ. This is a spectacular window. There's a few things we see in it. It's by Ontour Glenna. If we look at that small little panel down on the left where the letters are, is far better. Go down below that, and there are two small little pieces of iconography. One is a tower of light on Ontour Glenna, and the other is a crown, just an elaboration there, just the whole thing of I suppose, a bit of decoration, but probably with symbolism, the whole thing of the crowning of a saint, or even somebody overcoming death, achieving heaven. You're crowned in that sense. It's a resurrection symbol. And over the right, we actually have the name of the family that bequeathed the window in the first place. But this window was it's the Risen Christ. The iconography: angels with palm on the left, and the Risen Christ center. Angels with trumpets on the right. So, we have two different angels there. We have the last trump, and we have the palm on the left, and then we actually have the actual resurrection itself in the center. This was originally in the Kilfinnehy Church in Six Mile Bridge, County Clare. It was moved in 1990 to Chumgrady. And of course, Chumgrady is used occasionally. It was a heritage centre. It's not really longer than that now. So, there's questions to be asked there. This is actually it's featured in the archives of Ontour Glenna. Here we have a window that I have failed. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I have a cold, so it's sort of not helping me now. But this is a window that's in Portumna, in the church in Portumna, that fine big church there dedicated to St. Bridget in Portumna. This is, you could call it a rose window, but it's a circular, it's a wheel type window, as you can see. But what you see portrayed there are the four evangelists. There are four symbols: angel, lion, ox, and eagle. And then if you go ALOE, angel, lion, ox, and eagle, and then we go Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in that order. That's what they represent. Sometimes we find that Matthew is represented by a young man. You'll often find that as the evangelists are shown in human form, the younger one, the one without the beard, is Matthew. The eagle is John, riseth up on the wings of an eagle, biblical text, and then Saint Mark is the lion, and then the ox is Luke. The ox or the cow is Luke. But this window has, at the bottom, it has some sort of inscription, but that's the name of the donor. We don't know who made it, but I would hazard that that's a Clark Studio window. And I think so. I think others have said it's a Clark Studio window, but it's a very important window in a church with absolutely nothing to tell us anything about it. You know, there's no information there. Now, that should have been in the archives in the local parish in the past, but obviously that was just a deal that was done at the time when it was bought, receipts, etc., etc. That stuff gets thrown out over time. And this is one of the problems. You know, parishes change, priests change, you know, clutter. You get rid of the clutter. But sadly, that clutter is actually the historical data that we require today to be able to understand who made, who ordered, etc. This piece, what artist made that? That's, you know, but we suggest that it's Harry Clark's studio anyway. But also in the same church, up over the gallery, we have this window to St. Bridget, the actual patroness of the place. Now, this is not too unlike, when you look at it, it's not too unlike a window that you have in Laban that we can, you know, ascribe to the Celtic revival to the on Torglenna. Whether it is on Torglenna or not, we're not sure. We don't even know if it's an original window from here or whether it was a window that came from the original St. Bridget's in Portumna and that it was taken here in the latter 1950s, 1960, that period, and fitted into a new frame. We don't know. We have no data to tell us one way or the other. So it could be a slightly earlier window. If it is the same as the stuff in Laban, it should be much earlier. It should be, you know, earlier in the 20th century. Whereas we know that this church was I think, dedicated in 1961. So, you know, there is room there for movement and the resetting of it. And this happens as well. You'll find this in places that you have some of the earlier figures and that reincorporated into later windows. And one of the problems that creates is that when you go photograph them, you have this wonderful piece of stained glass, original piece, and you have this white light all around it. So when you take a photograph, you actually don't get the detail in the actual piece. It's quite difficult. That's broken my heart in places trying to get it. Just out the road from Portumna, out in Gortnumra, actually out at Lickmalassie. Lickmalassie is the old medieval name for Portumna. You have this wonderful window by William Early, the Early Studios. And this is the Ascension of our Lord into Heaven, which is an absolutely fabulous piece. Again, this is of that sort of revival period. This was installed somewhere in the 1930s, and it was installed by the local parish priest, Monsignor Joyce. Monsignor Joyce was a great community activist. He was deeply involved in rural development and community development. He actually gave windows to Ballinasloe, St. Michael's of Ballinasloe, but he was a really powerful priest in the area. But obviously he commissioned this piece, and it's a piece by William Early. You see Christ here, and you see all of the saints, the different characters, actually the apostles, Our Lady and the apostles down at the bottom, and then we have the angels up on top, and we have all of the different elements. A wonderful window with absolutely amazing colour and lighting. And then back to our friends in Aircourt. This is the Aircourt window, also by William Early. The same character. We have different iconography in this. What we actually have here is we have Sister Margaret Mary Allico kneeling there at the bottom. And she's the lady who is, I suppose, really responsible for the whole promotion of the Sacred Heart, the devotion to the Sacred Heart. She was a 17th century nun and visionary. And in her visions, she actually was, she visioned the Sacred Heart and the stories that were handed to her about the Sacred Heart. But there's other stuff in there as well. We can see right above Christ in that third panel there from the left, we can see a monstrance up there with the host in it. We can see angels. If you go right back over to the very left, in the top of the vertical light there, we actually see a saint in a boat, probably Saint Brendan. This is in Aircourt. St. Brendan would be the patron saint of the parish of Aircourt. So this is a wonderful window. A lot of iconography in it. And also down at the bottom, but you can't see it there because the window is, it's too small. There's a little tower down there as well. So again, probably signifying on Tor Glenna, the Tower of Glass. So there's all these little subtleties that you'll find in windows such as this. Also in that church, there's some of the detail. This is one of the things when you're looking at stained glass. Look at the detail. When you take photographs, focus in on the close shots, and you will actually see that there's some wonderful stuff because the window is so big and the window is so, I suppose, so ornate that you actually sometimes don't actually see the detail. But when you look at this, the panel on the left there, you can see the faces, the expressions on the faces of the apostles there, and the same on the face of Our Lady there. The colours of the garments, everything there is absolutely spectacular. And then in the other one we see there in the tracery there, we see all these little angels. And the other thing that we should look at are the faces themselves, the shapes of the faces, the coloration, the form of the faces. If we get familiar enough with this, with the faces, we can carry this from one place to the other. We begin to recognize particular artists and particular schools, and you can become quite proficient at it yourself after a few visits to a place. Just carry that picture, the mental picture, with you when you leave to the next place. This is also in Aircourt. These are other windows in Aircourt. We actually have we have on the left there, we have the Assumption of Our Lady, or it could be the Coronation. She's shown there with the crown, but I think it's actually the Assumption. The one in the middle there is actually the Annunciation. That's a wonderful theme. And then, of course, at the bottom here, or here on the right, we actually have the angel coming to Joseph and asking him to take the child and head into Egypt. So you have all of these stories portrayed on different windows in the side chapels in Aircourt, probably all early studios. Now, we do know that the Clarks did put in prices for work here, because we can find that in the files. But I still think this work is all early studios, even though, no, the one in the middle there, Behold the Handmaid of the Lord. That shield is a typical shield that you find associated with the earlies. That shield doesn't appear in either the left one or the right one there. But, I just think there's so much here by the early studios or by William Early that I think it's all their work. But not far from there, in Quansborough Church, a little rural church, we have these two windows either side of the altar. We have St. Joseph with a lily in his hand. Of course, the lily is a symbol of purity. St. Joseph was regarded as a very pure type of man. And then we have Our Lady herself here with all of the little characters. And again, she's standing on the crescent moon here in this instance. But those two windows are very similar to the ones in Aircourt. So we could be pretty comfortable that they're all by the one artist, or at least the one studio. And the thing about this is that we're looking at windows only a few miles apart, quality windows in churches only a few miles apart. What's going on? Well, one of the things that's happening here is that the priests themselves, I believe, are actually vying with each other. There's a certain amount of competition here, healthy competition between priests as they're doing up the churches. Well, they want to put in a quality window. So people want to patronize, people want to actually become donors for those windows. So, one works with the other. And I think when you're looking at this in Clonfert, you have to look back to the cathedral itself in Loughrea, where you have this quality art. And now, over time, all of the priests want to have something like this in their own church. And I think there is a healthy competition going on here. Then we go to a place like Tirnaskra, a modern church. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Lots of you will know Tirnaskra. It's a little rural, it's a very small village. Ballycrosan is the actual name of the crossroads there, but Tirnaskra, I suppose, is the village, and also the parish. But these three lights here, it's actually a fourth, but for some reason or other, St. Patrick should be in there, but I dropped them out of the slide and I couldn't get them back in after. But these three are windows that were in the church prior to the 1970s when this modern church was built. When the old church was knocked, the parishioners complained, they insisted that these windows had to be kept. So what the artist did here in this case is they actually took the panels, the figures of panels from those windows, and they incorporated them into laser glass. Now, I managed to get pretty good photographs there, but I can assure you that you go there on a normal day and it's almost impossible to photograph those. I photographed those with my phone because you can change a lot on your phone when you're working on them. That's the one thing. Phones are great because you can actually pull that little thing across and you can bring back up the color, the skin colors and all of that. If you can get up high enough in front of an image, you'll get a perfect image with a good phone camera, because they really are. They're quality cameras. But these were saved, but they would have been much better installed in a more colored window, because when you photograph it in, everything was the same. You know, with your camera, the light will change and it'll actually readjust itself and that sort of stuff. Not far from that, over in the little village of Kilbarron, here we have 3 windows by the Clarks. Now, they're 20th century windows. One is Sacred Heart, the other is Our Lady. That's the east window. That's the window, and of course, St. Patrick up on top. The church is dedicated to St. Patrick, so it's obvious that they have in a window here. Then you have St. Brendan in the middle with his oar, the typical attribute of the saints. Again, most saints have their own attributes, and then you have St. Columkill on the right. And Columkill is shown here with the doves, because, of course, that's where he takes his name from, Colum, the dove of the church. So it's, there's rich iconography in this. But what's interesting here is that these are signed Clark. It's hard to see it there now, but it's actually there. Now, some people have suggested they're Harry Clark. They're definitely Clark because it's signed. They have the imagery of Harry Clark. I don't actually have a date for these. I'm not convinced that they're Harry Clark. I don't think they are. The experts would have picked up on this much earlier. And I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody that's interested in this topic. I look at them for enjoyment and that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't pretend to be an expert in this whole field. This is really the realm of art historians, but we can all enjoy art. That's the principal thing. And this is what I'm doing here, looking at stuff like this. But that's in a little rural church over in East Galway. It's certainly Clark work, but it could be Clark Studios. Probably is Clark Studios. And then where I am in Clonfert, this is the cathedral in Clonfert. The 2 windows on the left are St. Matthew and Mark. They're by Watson's of Youghal. We mentioned Watson's earlier when we went to the Catholic Church in Nura. Again, you can see that Celtic ornaments, not as much, but there's Celtic ornament there. The middle one, the Good Shepherd, is also by Watson's. There's a certain amount of interlace and animal forms in there, serpents and that sort of stuff in that. Again, that's interlace. And then the other 2 lights, the 2 tall vertical ones, that's Peter and Paul. And these are by Heartlands of Birmingham. Heartlands of Birmingham were one of the companies that were supplying art to Ireland, all sorts of religious arts, not just stained glass, but they supplied metalwork, they supplied statues, they supplied everything. And themselves, people like Powell's, the Pearses, we think about the Pearses, we think about Pádraig Pearse and Willie Pearse. We see them as the great Irish patriots, but their father, James Pearse, was an English stone cutter. He came to Ireland making altars and stuff like that, and the boys followed the profession. They got into church art and that as well. The same with the likes of the Powells. The Powells were an English firm. They come to Ireland to set up studios here in Ireland. And this is what's happening. All of these people, Heartlands of Birmingham, were supplying stuff here. They supplied artists, etc., etc. And we're filling our churches with their work. They're very much in the same vogue as the mayors of Munich and London and other people like that. Now, I'm looking at something here. Sometimes you meet this absolutely spectacular iconography when you're looking at windows. The window on the left shows 2 different portrayals here. You have on the left light of the 2, you actually have Saint Dimna or Dimma. Not Dimma as in Dimma in Roscrea, but Saint Dima, I should say, but Saint Dimna. Saint Dimna was a female saint, and according to tradition, her mother died. Her mother was very beautiful. Her father was completely distraught, and he wanted to replace her. but the only one that was enough to replace her was her own daughter. So he was besotted by his own daughter. He wanted to take her as his wife. And of course, that wasn't going to happen. So Dipta heads off and she settles in Belgium in a place called Giel. Her father, who obviously he was a king, he was an important personage, he sends his men after her. She leaves with her male servant, but he sends his men and to take her back. She resists and to cut off her head, to chop off her head, and to chop off the head of her male servant. So if you look at, first of all, you see Dipta herself here. You see her with a sword inverted, with the point facing down. When you see a sword in that manner held by a saint, that's a symbol of martyrdom. A sword in the other form is a symbol of triumph. It's like a torch. A torch inverted symbolizes death. A torch upwards is life, is flaming. So, you know, these are subtle pieces of iconography that's used to express a story and to tell a story. But if we look at the central panel, well, we see a few things. We actually see her shoes there, very like what I showed in my opening slide. Those wonderful Harry Clark style shoes, those Clark's Junior shoes that you see there. But also, you see the two small figures there to the left. Without just, you see the figures, see the bodies, you see the blue for Dipta herself, and you see the brown for a male, or vice versa, sorry, the blue for the male. But you see that there's discs, there's colored discs replacing where the heads were, and then you can see the two heads to one side, the two severed heads. Interestingly, there's a holy well not far from this church, dedicated to Saint Dipta, and the cure that that well holds is a cure for illnesses of the head, whether it be headache, whether it be migraine, whether it be depression, any form of illness associated with the head. People used to go to this well in the past to have cured. So it's a very interesting story in that sense. And then over on the right, in the same panel, we have another window there. That window is actually by the early studios, and we can see that sort of shield-like panel down in the bottom right. So we have Patrick and Bridget portrayed there. And I'm not sure now, where are we fixed for time? I've sort of got over time now. A few more minutes, and I'm nearly in Lochrain. Let's put it that way. And once I get there, I think we'll stop. These are two mayors of Munich windows. One of them is in St. Matthew's in Glan, and the other is that's the Protestant church in Glan, or that side of Clontuscurt, and the other is in Crossconnell, the Catholic church. But the interesting thing here is the one man, the same man, I can't remember his name now, he actually gave both of these windows in 1908 to the two churches. So here you have a man giving a window to both the Catholic church and the Protestant church at the same time, both by mayors. The one that's in St. Matthew's in the Protestant church has the theme, "He that knocketh." So you can see the man knocking on the door and Christ inside. And then I suppose, to him who knocks and keeps on knocking, the door will be opened. And that comes from Matthew 7:8. And then the Nativity is the one in Crossconnell, but both by the same studio. Fine windows, absolutely fine windows, and expensive windows in their time, but both given by the one person. So there's an interesting back narrative there to that. Excuse me, I just can't help it. I have this cold. Oh, we're in Baldisloe. And this is St. Michael's Church of Baldisloe. St. Michael's, like the Cathedral in Lochrain, has a lot of very fine glass. It has Harry Clark studio. It has Harry Clark himself. It has windows by oh God, anyway, it's not going to come to me now. It could be in a minute. But what we're looking at here is that window, the central double light window there. It's St. John and Our Lady of the Rosary by Harry Clark studio. On the left of it, you can see the panel that's at the bottom. That's almond-shaped frame there, showing the crucifixion of Christ. And again, what I talked about earlier, that whole symmetry of the way it's laid out. That's something that you carry with you. And then you have John and Mary, one on either side, flanking the cross. On the other side, underneath Mary herself, underneath Our Lady of the Rosary, you actually have the St. Joseph, the Nativity. You can see the Holy Family there in that particular instance. Then also in that church, as I said, we have Harry Clark. That was Harry Clark's Jr. This is Harry Clark. And in this instance, the window here portrays St. Rose of Lima and also St. Patrick. And what's interesting here is that the man who commissioned this window is a man called Dr. Patrick Horn. So one window that is dedicated to St. Patrick, following Patrick Horn's own name. The other is that was for the window is dedicated to his daughter who died. So he picks a saint named Rose, and Rose of Lima was she's actually from obviously Lima, Peru. She's a South American saint. She's a 16th stroke 17th century character. She's a saint of the 17th century. So she's quite an interesting saint in that sense, but quite a late saint of the South American church. What you see here on the left panel is interesting because what's actually occurring there is she's burning her hands over a brazier. And you'd say, why? It's sort of, I suppose, she's first of all, she used to rub her face in pepper to try and blemish her looks. She was obviously beautiful. She was living a very austere sort of a life. And in this instance, she's burning her hands. She's actually scorching her hands over a flame. So this shows the austerity of her way of life, how she wanted to live. Self-harm in many ways. It's a strange thing, but this is what's happening here. And then over on the panel on the right, we actually have St. Patrick here, and he's blessing the Irish, if you like. This is St. Patrick, and he's on his mission to Ireland. But right beside him, you see a little character, a small little fellow there with a golden hair. That's St. Benin or St. Benignus. St. Benignus was a follower of Patrick's. He was a young boy at that stage when Patrick came into contact, but he went on to found a monastery that went on to become a church and a Romanesque settlement around tower and everything, outside Tuam in a place called Kilbarron, the Church of St. Benignus or St. Benin. So you get these little subtleties popped in here, but this is a Harry Clark window of 1925. And in the same church then we have early work. This is by William Early again. And what we see on the left is we actually see, well, the main window itself is a window of St. Bernadette of Lourdes. It's the apparition in Lourdes, St. Bernadette and Our Lady. And then on the right of the same window, on the right light there, we have St. Grellan. And St. Grellan was the native saint. He was the founder saint of Kilclooney, which was an early Christian site that later went on to become Ballinasloe. The parish of Ballinasloe is really the parish of Kilclooney in the medieval period. So we have this local saint. And again, if we look at St. Grellan there in the very right panel, you'll see dressed in purple in a in monk's habit, but down underneath you see Sancta Grellan Ore Pro Nobis. That particular shield that you see there is, if you like, a shield that almost tells you that this is the work of the Earleys or of William Early. Anywhere he does work, you see a shield. You generally find a shield like this on the windows. That's he might decide it, but but it's there, which is interesting. And in the same church, we actually have these windows as well. We have the one on the left. They're by Patrick Pollen. We're about 1958. So we're moving away from that traditional sort of glass. We're moving into stuff that's very like Evie Hone here again. And Pollen, there is influence going on here between Evie Hone and Patrick Pollen. What's actually portrayed here on the left of that window, that's the it's the raising of the daughter of Jairus, or Jairus in 1958. And the other window then is the Holy Family, the Nativity and the Flight into Egypt by Patrick Pollen. And the same artist is found to have done work, but this is actually not his. No, this is Patrick Pye, another very late artist. Patrick Pye only died relatively recently. This is out in Our Lady of Lourdes in Crea, another church just outside on the Roscommon side of Ballinasloe. So we see the work here of Patrick Pye, and what we're looking at here is the Annunciation. You can see Our Lady at the bottom there with the Christ child, and you can it's quite abstract in how you view it, but when you get up close, it's actually quite an attractive window. And then in the same church, inside the nave of the church, we have this very unusual looking window. It's the Garden of Gethsemane on the left, and Noli Me Tangere, Touch Me Not, from 1958 by Patrick Pye. And in the same church, then we have this work by Harry Clark Studio. So we have these wonderful Harry Clark windows, Harry Clark studio windows here again. We have the Coronation of Our Lady in the double light window, and then we have the Sacred Heart. Or sorry, I suppose it's not the Sacred Heart. It's more Christ himself. It's the figure of Christ, and then you have Our Lady, and you can see the way they have their arms folded. But what's also interesting when you look at these windows are the little angels. There's wonderful little faces in here, and also when you get right up close to them, and we'll see that in the next panel. Here we are. These are the details, and this is what I'm talking about, detail. When you look at glass like this, you need to explore the detail. For example, when we look down along the left one here, we see that there's a lamp in here. We see that there's a shrine or maybe the Ark of the Covenant. We see the MR for Mary, and we see the BVM for the Blessed Virgin Mary, and then we see the shoes up there. That's wonderful. And the angels then flanking the pierced heart of Our Lady, the seven sorrows, the seven dolors, as to call them. Next to that, then on the bottom, we have that little angel again with the XP, the Cairo symbol for Christ. And up above that, then we have the heart with the cross on top of it, the flaming heart with the cross on top of it. Next, going to the right, we have that eagle's head that's showing there. This is something that you'll find in the Clark Studio and Clark Windows. This eagle, it could be the eagle of St. John, or it could be something else. And then if we go right down to the bottom panel there, that image there of the shoes, that's the image that I use on my cover slide there, simply because of the detail. Again, everything is symmetrical, absolute symmetry in how it portrayed that aspect of it. And just out the road, 7 or 8 miles out the road, we have in Fohada Parish Church, we have these wonderful windows again by the Harry Clark Studio. Absolutely amazing. A lot of the same sort of imagery that you saw already in Korea and other places, with wonderful windows in a little parish church that you drive past. You said, well, there's nothing here, but there's wonderful glass in that church. So it just shows what's taking place in all our little churches. And these are all within the hidden heartlands. They're all, there's I believe there's a tour here. It's more than a day's tour. Like there's opportunities here for communities to take advantage of the quality art that they have in their churches here, without spoiling or desecrating or doing anything else to their churches, but actually showing that there's another aspect to their local church, another side, the cultural aspect of it, as well as the religious aspect of it. And I think we'd be doing a great day's work in bringing that to the fore ourselves as Heritage Society. Now, we're nearly there, I can assure you. I'm not going to go on. I have 48 slides. I'm at slide 38, so I'll be finishing very, very shortly. We're actually now in Loughrea, and the window that you see on the left is in the baptistry in Loughrea, 1904 by A.E. Child. Very similar to what we saw in Lura, very similar to the window that we saw that's in Grady. Child had that particular way of creating pieces. There's a lot of light, there's a lot of what you could almost call bright light in the Child windows. There's something special about them, the way that they're done. And then we have these other windows by Child here. We have St. Clair and St. Francesca, also in Loughrea Cathedral. Loughrea Cathedral really is the home of the Celtic Revival. But there's no work in Loughrea by any other artist except artists from Montour Glenna. There's no Harry Clark. People talk about the Harry Clark windows in Loughrea. Rubbish. There's absolutely nothing by Harry Clark in there, because the studio really had a foothold there. The studio made the first class there, and in a way, Edward Martin's influence there really set the way. The partnership between himself and the bishop, and also his links with Lady Gregory and people involved in that other side of the revivalism, the whole Gaelic revivalism and the whole cultural revivalism, meant that Loughrea, when it was decked out, it was fitted with the best of everything. Absolutely, it's worth a visit any day of the year. It's really worth a visit. I would urge you to go over and see it. Take a trip over there as a society. You'll be well paid to see it. And if you get a chance, if you're talking to Monsignor Cahill Geraghty there, if you're arranging in advance, you will also get to see the Diocesan Museum next door, which is a wonderful thing as well. Here we have work by Michael Healy. 3 of Michael Healy's pieces here. We have St. John the Evangelist by Michael Healy, 1927 on the left. And then we have in the center, we have the two wrecks, You Are the King by Michael Healy, 1933. And then we have the Queen of Heaven by Michael Healy, 1933. And there's a sort of a progression we've seen here. The Queen of Heaven, when you look at it, you will actually see that there's far more light coming through it. It has these little, like little flickers of light coming through it, because these windows were painted, fired, pickled with acid, another layer of paint put on, different paint put on, fired, pickled with acid. This was going on layering after layering after, almost laminating the glass with color, but at the same time pickling, so that when the light comes from behind, it actually shimmers through the very same as if you were looking at, well, not dust, but that sort of an effect. It's almost like starlight coming through the windows. And then the really fabulous windows in Loughrea are these: the Ascension, Tree Light by Michael Healy, 1936, and the Last Judgment, Tree Light by Michael Healy, 1936 to 1940. So, you know, that's a loose date that's given there. So I don't think people know exactly when. It probably started in 36, but it went on for a while if that was the case. But what you see here, first of all, you actually see the Ascension. You see the apostles watching Christ ascending to heaven. But when we move over to the Last Judgment, it's totally different. We actually see if you like, the damned on one side, and you can see the face of the damned over on the right, looking very unhappy, whereas the other people are looking up. There's some hope of salvation for the guys on the left, but clearly the guys on the right are in despair. And you have to see this in reality. It's almost impossible to photograph. It's a big window. You can see the pinnacles of the confessional boxes sticking up in front of it, and that sort of stuff, but absolutely fabulous. And these were cleaned recently. They were conserved and cleaned in the last 3 years of that. And since that occurred, they're absolutely amazing. So I would say, make your way over to Loughrea. Now, I'm going to, regardless of what else I have, I'm going to finish with this slide because I'm tired, and I'm sure you're tired, and you know, I could stay going on showing more photographs, but there's only 7 more, but we'll stop here. We have St. Patrick by Child again here on the left, and you can see the Paschal fire down at the bottom. St. Patrick lighting was it on the hill of Slane that he lit the fire? Yeah, it was Tara or Slane, but anyway, Slane. He lights the fire, of course, and that provokes the the High King. And as of course, it's the first statement of Christianity in Ireland according to the Armagh tradition, if you like. In the centre, then we have the Centurion, and this is one of the things that they talk about. You know, his portrayal of the Centurion, but this is a very strong character here, portrayed in crimsons and reds. A very stout piece of work here. And then over on the right, St. Anthony from 1908. So it's the moment between the different periods that we can look at here with Michael Healy. You can actually read the progression of Healy's work right through in the cathedral in Loughrea. And then when you're looking at stuff elsewhere, you can go back and you can actually, if you get your eye in for it, you can sort of identify the early stuff as comparison to the later stuff. And this slide I have to show because I spoke about this lady earlier. We have St. Ita and St. Brendan by Sarah Purser. Sarah Purser was the person who set up on Terryglass. So this is an important window, but was painted by Catherine O'Brien, a contemporary of hers, another member of on Terryglass. Beside that, then we have St. Joseph by Michael Healy. St. Joseph, you can see here, and one of the things is in this here, I think it's the lily. I think the Christ Child is presenting the lily. And down at the bottom, we actually have the flight into Egypt being shown there. So this is the story really of St. Joseph, the importance of St. Joseph in the life of the child Jesus. Then next to that, the third window from the left, we actually have a window by Evie Hone, a window of St. Bridget. And you can see St. Bridget giving out the loaves to a young girl here. This whole notion of her giving bread, giving butter, you know, how she broke her father's heart, you know, all of this sort of stuff. But she's here, typical Evie Hone work. You know, she's very natural in her pose. Everything about the Evie Hone work is very natural, but some of it could be almost medieval in the way it's portrayed. And then the very last one here is Saint Simeon by Michael Healy, and that's a very powerful piece. it's a wonderful color, and he's there taking the Christ child. You know, this is in the temple and that sort of thing. You know what? I'm nearly there. Here we have St. Bridget by Patrick Pye. I mentioned Pye. He's back in Ballinasloe in Korea, but he's here. He did one of the windows. He was probably, I think he was the last artist here. 1957. He was among the last of the artists here, the last of the pieces here in Loughrea. That's in the porch. It's a very stylized representation. You can see the Bridget's cross beneath the chair there where St. Bridget is sitting was a very stylized representation of St. Bridget. The only thing that would really tell you about St. Bridget is the iconography there, or the attribute, the Saint's cross, the St. Bridget's cross, which very simple, just lines and stuff like that. It's very abstract. And that's what goes on. And then the other window there is of St. Brendan by Sarah Purser, 1903. This is one of her, she didn't do a whole lot of work, but this is one of the works. And then, you know, if we go over into Belmont, luckily, this window is sitting in High Street Church, artist unknown as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, obviously somebody knows who the artist was here. This is some of the more modern sort of art. We find these in churches around the place. These are important pieces. They're really worthwhile pieces. And this is in Pulla, St. Mary's Church in Pulla. We have the Sacred Heart on the left, and we have Our Lady on the right. These are actual pieces by Harry Clark. So these are two Harry Clark windows. And just up the road in St. Modge's Church in Moher, we have Harry Clark's studio. It was a triple-edged window here, but we have we have Our Lady, and we have Christ himself, the Sacred Heart, and then we have St. Joseph on the right. But this is the studio's work here as opposed to the original. And in the same church there in Moher, we actually have St. Montion by Harry Clark. And St. Montion's is important because the original shrine, the 12th century shrine, housing the bones of St. Montion, is actually on display in the church. The replica is actually in the National Museum. Sort of a contradiction, but it just shows that how important the shrine was to the community. And that portrayal there of the shrine is very accurate in how it's done. You know, it looks very, very like that. And then on the right one here, we have St. Anne and the Blessed Virgin. And of course, St. Anne is the mother of Our Lady, or the Virgin. And, you know, she's always shown teaching her daughter. She's preparing her for the life that she's going to live, for the role that she's going to fulfill in life. And finally, in that church, we also have, and I think that's the last slide, we have in Moher, we have this St. Kieran. And of course, this is Kieran of Clonmacnias, just down the road, because you're within the diocese here of Clonmacnias. And this one was by Kevin Kelly of the Abbey Stained Glass Studio. So we have another studio coming in here, dated to 1949. So, folks, I hope I have suitably tired you out. I have tired myself out anyway, I can assure you. And I hope that it was of some interest. The least that I hope I did was make you think about the glass, the stained glass, the quality of the stained glass that we have here at our disposal here in the Heartlands region of County Tipperary, Galway. I didn't show anything from Roscommon, but it's there, and Offaly and Clare. You know, we really have an awful lot here.
Christy, I just wonder, would you mind if you just stop sharing your slides, and
I will.
Then we can.
How do I stop? Yeah. Stop share. There we are.
Right, and your camera is off, I think, as well, Christy, there at the moment.
Oh, yeah, I had that turned off. I didn't want to be seen because I was snuffling.
Well,
and I'm still snuffling. This actually has got worse. I have a pile of hankies here in front of me now.
Well, you were telling us earlier, it was while you were going around doing a tour of the stained glass windows that you got wet. It
was. Well, I got wet in Ballinasloe the other day, and I just can't get my head wet. It doesn't matter. My head. That's it. I have a head coat.
Well, you didn't allow us to get wet tonight by agreeing to do Zoom, but it was a fantastic talk.
I hope so. No, I hope it was of some.
And a fantastic tour. Like it's amazing, as you said. All this is within easy reach, even at the price of petrol and diesel at the moment. It's still within easy reach. And someone had said to me earlier in the week, you know, like, where exactly was the Heartlands? So I suppose you have the ancient East, the Wild Atlantic Way, and then the hidden Heartlands in the middle. And like you said it some years ago to us, that like the stained glass windows alone, there is a tour there to be you know,
Absolutely.
to do.
Well, I remember Father Egan, Kevin Egan, the late Kevin Egan of Portumna, of Clonford Diocese, the historian for Ballinasloe. Kevin did an outing for the Galway Archaeological and Historical Society, probably in the 70s. And the title of his tour was A Safari of the Stained Glass Windows. He actually did a safari. We went on a safari one Sunday, following him around from church to church. And it's huge. I believe that there's great potential for us. You know, I really do. I think it's something we just have so much of it, but we need to learn about it. We need to, we need to engage with it.
You know, just like even looking at there today or tonight watching you, Christy, like we often go in and I suppose we often look at things, but we don't see it. And like when I suppose it's easier maybe even on the screen, the detail, but as you say, it's just take the time to look at it. Christy, I was just thinking something. Do we know how long it would have taken to do one piece?
I don't know. But
are
I
we
can
weeks,
tell you,
months, years?
Oh, I think a commission could be going on for 12 months. I don't actually know, and that's something I should know, but I don't know because it's a very slow process. Because first of all, well, you have to send on your proofs, if you like, to the priest. So the local priest is going to get these sketches or cartoons, as to call them. He's going to make a decision then whether he likes that or not, or whether he wants sort of modified, or maybe the actual iconographer team that's in it mightn't suit him. So that goes back. Then that gets drawn up. They actually draw it up full size. They have to cut out the shapes and that sort of stuff. So it's mocked up. It has to be painted. They have to paint on their lines to put the lead where the lead is going to go. So they have to choose the glass. So there's a whole process. So there's somebody making the leads. The glass has to be cut. Every section has to be cut. You have to make a decision where you make that cut, because you don't want to cut somebody's head off at the neck. It might be more suitable to run down along the shoulder. So when we look at it, we see a finished product and we're absolutely amazed. These guys are artisans as well as being artists, and everybody in the process. Often you find that there's somebody different maybe might be cutting the glass and preparing it than is actually doing the painting. But every process has to work with the other. So but there are Abbey Stained Glass Studio have there's a video of some of their work out there, but you can actually go online and you'll find videos showing you how they're doing this work, and you'll be absolutely amazed with it.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's an amazing piece of work, Christy, when you look at it. And they use the lead then as well. Is there lead in?
Yeah, the lead, what they call the lead that they use. It's a double lead. It's a lead with, you can fit glass into from both sides. So that'll come in strips and it's cut off. They call them cames, C-A-M-E-S, cames. So you have to fit these. You have to solder them. And the glass is fit in this. Then you have to get the putty in there, the glazier's putty that they use. They use it's a cement really that they use. There's so many processes. There's layers of processes going into that. And of course, then at the end of the day, you have to come back after 30 or 20 or whatever years and redo the lead, because the lead is going to sag as well, because lead is quite soft and as hell. And of course, we didn't mind them. In the past, we didn't understand that you needed to put up a storm glazing outside.
Yeah.
And even when we did, we put up a storm glazing that had no hole in it to let the air out. So that what happened is the air between the window and the storm glazing it pushed, and it caused harm. So there's a whole lot of things. And then, of course, the people inside polishing the windows did their own harm. So it's amazing what you find and see as you look at them. But see, the Heartlands myself did the survey in Galway, and we just saw so many different things that affected the windows, if you like.
Yeah. Just, is there anyone else there that would like to ask Christy anything or make a comment?
Before that, Helen, I'm just going to stop recording now, I think. So I'll pause the recording before, and then allow people to ask.
Yeah, this is a very important year for us at the Irish Workhouse Centre. First of all, we're actually marking the 175th anniversary of Black 47, the blackest moment in the Irish family. 1846 was bad. There was hope that the potato would grow again, but 1847 saw absolute devastation. The potatoes completely failed that year. So we're celebrating. Celebration is not the word. it's the wrong word to use. We're actually commemorating the 175th anniversary of Black 47 with a conference on the famine at the workhouse in May. Later in the year then, in August, after Heritage Week, we're going to have a conference marking the 100 years since the closure of Irish workhouses. When we set up the Free State in 1922, one of the things that occurred was we set up new local authorities and that sort of stuff. But the workhouses per se, the workhouse system, that poor law union system was abolished. So the old poor law union system and the workhouses were closed. Some of them did remain as hospitals and other, nursing homes and that things, but officially closed in 1922. So it's 100 years since our workhouses closed. So we can mark the 100th anniversary there. And also, we're marking the 170th anniversary of Portumna Workhouse because it was opened in 1852. So we have three, if you like, we're taking 3 bites of the cherry this year. It's it's part of our whole, if you like, trying to build our numbers again. We're going to have a series of conferences and different things. But we also have this year, which is a wonderful thing, we have several artists, very important artists, have gifted pieces of art to us. So we're going to have David Rooney's work. We're going to have 9 pieces of David Rooney's work. David Rooney at davidrooney.com. David does wonderful stuff, but he has 9 pieces for us related to the famine, related to the workhouses, and related to the coffin ships and all that. We have Joe McCall, who's in Kilbarron, not a native of Kilbarron, ceramics. Joe is going to, he's actually bringing on permanent, semi-permanent exhibition. He's bringing his potato people exhibition. That's going to add immensely to what we have. We have one room set aside already for that. A very stark room in the workhouse, one with holes in the roof, and it'll be perfect. I say holes in the roof, holes in the ceiling. There'll be no water coming through. That's what he wants. He wants it to portray what the things were like for the hardship of it. We have Kieran Toohey's work back again. For those of you that haven't seen Kieran Toohey's work, Dark Shadows. Kieran works in wood, in the bog oak, the bog timbers, and he has actually told the story of the famine through his artwork. He's an amazing sculptor, absolutely amazing, and we're very fortunate that Kieran has left he brings his full suite of work to us every year. So it's on, you could almost call semi-permanent loan. It suits Kieran because we have a place to exhibit it. It suits us because it's a really important draw. And then the other thing that we're actually after at the moment, whether we get it or not, we have to get the funding because it can cost money for some bits and pieces. Hopefully we'll get the rest of the money for this. We might end up with the Glass Potatoes exhibition to coincide with the Shorelands Festival in September, or in August, sorry, that period. So we have a lot of stuff happening that way, apart from the fact that we're doing a lot more work in the workhouse. We have applied for a grant. We have upgraded our museum. The museum now is good, but I would put a call out. I'd take advantage of this situation and put a call out there. We have set up at the workhouse, we have set up what we call the Irish Workhouse Museum. And this museum, its function is to act as a repository for artifacts associated with the workhouses of Ireland. So if somebody happens to have something that came out of Boris Kane workhouse or any other workhouse, and they felt that it should go into a place where the public could see it, we would gladly speak to them about that. We'd exhibit it. We have, we're working towards museum standards and that. So there's a lot happening there this year, and we want this to be a good year, and we want people to support us.
It's fantastic, a fantastic lineup of events, Christy, and also just to acknowledge and get it out there, the importance of this year for the workhouse.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, and you have been doing huge work there. There's a whole team of you there, and last year as well, no more than ourselves here trying to keep ourselves going. Your talks over Zoom was fantastic, and it played a big part as well in keeping as you said earlier, keeping it alive.
Absolutely, with Claire and David said the blinder, and I came in there on the sideline. But when it comes to technology, the best I can do is bring a lead. That's what I do. I bring the leads.
Well, the lead is important.
And Niall helped us initially. He trained us up. He got us going actually on Zoom, which was great. He trained us online to use all this stuff, because it's daunting, as you know yourself, when you start out first.
It is, but like it's a fantastic, and as you say, Niall has been a great help in the backing here to ourselves, and you know, it has allowed us to keep in contact with members, and as you saw in your own Zoom, the amount of people from outside of the country, from all over. So it's huge, like, and we're very grateful to you, Niall. No, I don't know, Christy. You might be needing a hot.
I am. I have 2 bottles of porter. You know those nice craft porters. And I'm afraid, in case Ija has taken one of them, that she won't anyway, she just touched porter. It's all right. But I'm going to look after one of them at least anyway before I go to bed tonight.
That's good iron, Christy.
I need it now. It might help my cold.
Yeah.
If it do no harm.
So, I'll leave the recording on, Helen, if you want to just thank Christy there.
Yeah, Christy, just again to thank you, and to thank you for your support to us over the years, and in particular again tonight, and to thank everyone for joining us once again. And please God, in another month's time, we'll meet you again, and we're heading hopefully towards going back into the hall. But we still might, as Niall said earlier, we might learn how to live stream. But Christy, to thank you once again, and please God, we'll see you in the workhouse over the coming year.
Great, Helen. No, and I always enjoy interacting with yourselves, because we're on the same game. We're all trying to, keep it going.
Keep it going. That's what it is. Okay, Christy.
God
Mind
bless.
yourself.
Thanks.
Look after that cold.
I will.
Good night,
I'm
everyone.
going to go now. I'm going to press that leave button, so everything should be finished. Good luck.